Okay, so let's get right into it. When we hear the word disaster, our minds usually jump to the immediate chaos, right? The destruction. But that's really just the first ripple. The story of what happens next, to societies, to economies, even to war and peace, is way more complex, and honestly, a lot more surprising than you might think.
Take a look at this number, 10 meters. That's over 30 feet. Now imagine a wall of water that tall. That's not a hypothetical. That's the wave that slammed into Cadiz, Spain, after the massive Lisbon earthquake way back in 1755. It was an event that didn't just change the coastline, it changed history.
So what happens when a force like that hits a society? You'd assume it's a simple story of loss, and of course it is. But it's not just about what's destroyed. It's also about what gets created in the aftermath. Disasters, believe it or not, can be these incredible catalysts for change, for transformations that nobody sees coming.
So, to really get a handle on that ripple effect, we first have to understand the initial force. What exactly makes a tsunami so different, so uniquely powerful?
The key thing to get here is what's moving. We're all used to waves at the beach, you know? Those are just on the surface, driven by wind. A tsunami is a completely different beast. It's the entire column of water, from the deep sea floor all the way up to the surface, that's being moved. The whole ocean is flexing its muscle at once. That's why it packs such a devastating punch.
So how does this monster get born? Well, usually it starts with a monster earthquake. You've got these things called subduction zones, where one tectonic plate is sliding under another. But they don't slide smoothly. They get stuck, sometimes for centuries, just building up this incredible pressure. And when that pressure finally snaps, the seafloor itself can just lurch upwards or drop down, instantly heaving that entire ocean column of water above it.
And this shows us that while the threat is global, it's definitely not random. It's highly concentrated along the planet's geological seams, where all the action is. You've got the famous Pacific Ring of Fire, you've got the Indian Ocean, even the Mediterranean. These are the coastlines that have to live with the constant nagging possibility that the sea could rise up against them.
Okay, so we've got the science down. Now let's dive into a human story that is just a total paradox. We're going to Aceh, Indonesia, where a wave of utter destruction somehow managed to wash away decades of violent conflict.
So, picture this. For nearly 30 years, before 2004, the Indonesian province of Aceh was just trapped in this brutal, seemingly endless civil war. The fighting between separatists and the government had cost countless lives, displaced over 100,000 people. Peace talks had been tried, and they had failed, over and over again. It looked hopeless.
And then, the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami hit Aceh. It was an unimaginable catastrophe. And yet, less than a year later, this happened. A peace agreement was signed. How on earth? The wave that brought so much death and destruction also, impossibly, brought peace.
Well, when analysts looked back, they concluded the tsunami gave both sides what you could call the perfect excuse. The whole world was suddenly watching Aceh. A flood of international aid was pouring in. It created this totally new environment where both sides could come to the negotiating table without looking weak, without looking like they were giving in. The disaster reset the board and made peace not just an option, but an absolute necessity.
But if you think a peace treaty is the end of the surprises, you are in for a treat. Because the economic story of what happened next is just as counterintuitive, and it really messes with everything we assume about how you recover from a disaster.
So economists had this fascinating puzzle on their hands. How do you actually measure the true economic cost of a once-in-a-generation catastrophe? You can't just compare before and after. So they used this really clever technique. They created a ghost version of Aceh, a statistical twin, a synthetic Aceh, by combining data from other similar regions in Indonesia that didn't get hit. This gave them a baseline, a glimpse into what might have been if the wave had never come.
And the results were just staggering. Take a look at the blue line. That's the real Aceh. You see that initial brutal dip in 2005, right? Total devastation. But then something incredible happens. The economy doesn't just recover, it starts to grow faster than its statistical ghost. It actually starts to outperform what it was projected to do.
So why? What happened? Well, that tragedy triggered one of the biggest reconstruction efforts in history.
A massive flood of international aid and investment poured in. And this wasn't just about replacing what was lost. It was a chance to rebuild better. New infrastructure, stronger buildings. It's a powerful, if incredibly brutal example of what economists call creative destruction. The old was literally wiped away, and in its place something new and more robust was built.
The 2004 tsunami wasn't just a regional disaster. It was a brutal wake-up call for the entire planet. It forced a massive global shift from just reacting to disasters to trying to get ahead of them.
And here's a fact that's just chilling. In 2004, while the Pacific had a warning system, the entire Indian Ocean basin had nothing. No coordinated system at all. That absence tragically multiplied the death toll, as wave after wave hit coastlines with absolutely no warning.
But look at the progress since then. The world went into overdrive. You see these international frameworks pop up, coordinating efforts. Countries like Spain, realizing their own coastlines were vulnerable, built their own national alert networks. And now? There are over 1,400 monitoring stations around the globe that can send out alerts within minutes of a potential event.
And this isn't just some abstract policy stuck in a binder at the UN. This is what it looks like on the ground. These signs from Chile, they're now a common sight in at-risk coastal towns all over the world. They're clear, simple visual guides telling people exactly where to go to be safe.
And the planning gets incredibly specific. I mean, this flowchart from Chile is just a masterclass in communicating with the public. It's not just run for high ground. It's a whole decision tree. How should you evacuate? What if you can't make it to high ground? It even lays out options like vertical evacuation, which means getting to the top of a tall, sturdy building. This is how you turn panic into a plan.
So it's pretty clear we've gotten a lot smarter about preparing for the sudden, violent threats the planet can throw at us. But what about the slower-moving threats, the ones that are more insidious, the ones that come not from the Earth's core but from us? Many scientists now argue we've entered a brand new geological age, the Anthropocene. The core idea is simple but profound. Human activity is now the single biggest force shaping the entire planet. The old, clean line between natural systems and human systems, it's been completely erased. We've become a geological force ourselves.
In this new age, our own choices are the main drivers of instability. But, and this is a huge but, that responsibility isn't shared equally. Not even close. This data from the UN is stark. The wealthiest 1% of the world's population is responsible for 17% of all carbon emissions.
This chart here really lays out the silent trade-off we've been making. Between 1992 and 2014, our produced capital, that's our factories, infrastructure, all the stuff we build, it shot up by 80%. But that growth was paid for. Our natural capital, the clean air, the stable climate, the healthy ecosystems that everything else depends on, it declined by 40%. We have literally been liquidating our natural inheritance to fuel short-term growth. So here's where we land. The story of the tsunami shows us we can learn. When faced with a clear and present danger, we can adapt, innovate, and build incredible systems to protect ourselves. We've learned how to prepare for the Earth's fury. The defining challenge of the Anthropocene, the great test of our time, is whether we can learn how to build defenses against ourselves.